It's time today to talk about Skypiea. I grinded the absolute living hell out of Skypiea, but basically I just wanted to go over the entirety of it, my thoughts on it, and I kind of want to do this for future One Piece arcs in general. If you're new to the channel, drop a sub and let's get into this bad boy. Skypiea actually generally starts in Jaya. I would say it actually starts meeting the two monkey brothers. They don't hold as much importance as Cricket does. Cricket is basically this lunatic that lives on Jaya, straight up due to the fact that he is the descendant of Noland the infamous liar. What I didn't realize right off the bat was that this is going to literally correlate to everything overarching Skypiea. I thought at first it was generally just like, hey, it's this weird guy and like he had someone that believed that the Sky Island was real, but it gets much more than that, which we'll get into. One thing before we do get into Skypiea is there's the big lore dump episode of 151, like right before they're about to go up. I think it was kind of like a double-edged sword that they did that right whenever the arc began, because it kind of drops all of this stuff on you and all of this world building. It introduces Blackbeard, it introduces Whitebeard, it introduces more warlords, you know, those five elders, all that stuff going on at Marie Joy, the holy city. And I say this is a double-edged sword because to a lot of people it feels disjointed from the overall story, the overarching story, because I mean they go all the way up to the sky. It feels like that it's just a completely different world that they're in when they introduce all this stuff right before you go up, and they're like, all right, we'll see you in 60 episodes, have fun up there. It does feel kind of weird because it feels like they're trying to be like, all right, well, this stuff's going on here while you're up there, because it gets you excited, but at the same time you're like, all right, well, I want to see more. All right, so they get there. I especially liked how quickly it kind of threw you in. The wings break because the knock-up stream is literally like taking you like thousands of miles into the air. Not thousands, but hundreds of miles into the air. It introduces two of the most important characters of the entire arc literally as soon as they get up there. And they meet Gonfall and they meet Wiper. And I didn't even realize that those are two of the 3 or 4 most important characters for the entire arc. And you kind of get a general idea that stuff is kind of like bad up here. They didn't make it to the entrance gate and there's already combat everywhere. They're like, okay, well, this isn't a super peaceful place, despite it kind of was in like conjunction with like how nice and beautiful everything looked. It's like, oh, we're in the clouds. Okay, war is here. Gunfall. Top 3 characters of the arc for me. I generally thought, like, this was my first impressions, was that he was just like a knight that was in the sky and he like fought for Skypiea. And I think that would be like what a lot of people would assume at first. There's like a police type force in Skypiea, and this knight is kind of like what they are. Unfortunately, the police force that's in Skypiea is a little bit different, but we'll get to that. He's just kind of like, hey, if you need help, blow this whistle. This first one's on me. And I was like, oh, that's a pretty nice guy, actually. Saved their lives, and he's gonna send them on their way. In retrospect, you would have thought that Gonfall would have like warned them, told them what's going on here, like, hey guys, you're gonna have to pay a toll, and if you don't pay the toll, they're gonna snitch on God, and God's gonna strike you down from his mighty throne. So good luck. He was just like, all right guys, I got my own stuff to tend to. Probably one of my favorite parts about Skypiea was straight up just the design of it, the sheer scale of it, the setting. I think the setting is a lot of what we'll say redeems the arc. I don't think it needs redeeming, but I think the setting in general is so pretty and so cool. For example, if they had done this arc on, like, let's say somehow like Luffy and everybody make it to like another planet, because it feels like they're on another planet the entire time. So they make it to another planet, it would have felt 20 times worse because the setting has to be there. I think the setting was like 90% of what I liked so much about this arc. It comes with its downfalls because again, it feels kind of disjointed from the rest of the world. I literally was missing the regular sea so much by the time this arc was over. I was like, I cannot wait for this boat to be back in water again. Let's talk about Conus and Pagaya. I think Conus and Pagaya were probably 2 of the much weaker links of Skypiea. They're big characters, like they hold a big place in the entire arc. Kind of uninteresting. Conus especially. Her dad kind of gets a pass because he's not as important, I don't think. I guess they both kind of have the same importance. I don't like the antennas. I think the antennas just look awkward. Conus eventually, you know, betrays the crew. I think it was supposed to seem like it was like, oh, what's going on? Like, what's happening? When you guys watch my reaction to it, I'm gonna be like, oh wait, she's betraying them. Yeah, no, that's what's happening, because it did like a long pan on her face. These were the episodes you lost. Oh, true. The then why did you tell us moment with Conus is so underrated. This was a big moment. This gave me more respect for Conus as a character, because yeah, she betrays half the crew and sends them off to their death and sends them off to a place where she believes God to be living that will sacrifice them to the entity. But like, hey, she apologized for it and told them later. You know what I mean? I think now's a really good time to talk about the dials. I think think the dials are a really cool concept and they give a lot of personality to this place we're in, but I thought they were such a ease of use plot device. They walk into like the dial store and he's like, hey, this dial will file your taxes. I'm just like, oh, okay. This dial does this dial does that. Like, dials do goddamn everything, and it's never explained. I don't know if it will be later on. Usopp like took a ton of dials when they left, but they're like, yeah, we got these bad boys. Like they've just been here and we use them. They're awesome. That's kind of the beginning of the arc. I honestly did think the arc had a very strong beginning, aside from the episodes I need to talk about now. Captain McKinley and the White Berets are sort of the police force on Skypiea. Why do they army crawl? Why do they do that? I thought it was a little goofy at first. I was like, oh, that's funny. They just move like really slowly everywhere, and then they also are really weak. When I was writing down my notes on this arc, in the cons category, I originally put the White Berets in the cons, but the funny thing is, in the third act, I actually moved them over to the pros. Hey, so other than that, they kind of sucked. Nami goes and checks out the upper yard. You get kind of a hint of this god that's like striking people down. I think the best part about it was like there's a lot of mystery because it's in such a foreign land. You're under the impression that there's like somebody that has eyes and ears on you at all times. Unfortunately, I will not be keeping that energy up because the second act was a bit of a drag. The second act basically begins with one piece of the crew. They're split up because some were taken to the sacrificial altar and then the others are going to find them. Luffy, Usopp, and Sanji begin their trek into the upper yard. They come across this thing. Yes, I'm referring to Satori as a thing. I'm gonna give you also a preliminary rating of all the priests. So there's 4 priests under Eneru. Coming in at our very last spot, and this, honestly, these 2 spots were hotly contested. Very last spot is Satori. I'll literally explain why. I will literally break down why Satori is last. 1, can't stand the laugh. Can't remotely stand it. Ha ha! I wanted to blow my brains out. It genuinely drove me mad. Shut up, please. So the laugh was probably the biggest con. Aside from that, it's like, I get it. It's a joke because like he's a ball and he looks like the ball's in his domain. It's like, ha, that's the joke. He looks like the balls. Ah! And like that's his entire character design and what it's all based off of. And I honestly found the whole like ball concept's like, ooh, what's in it? An explosive candy, a PlayStation 5? Who knows what's gonna be in the next one? I honestly was kind of over that concept as soon as they introduced it. The second con was his power. Third con, his character design. And then the very last con, which I probably had the biggest problem with. Satori decides to summon the Dragon Balls. Luffy, Sanji, and Usopp lose. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm not always the best in terms of power scaling and knowing who should win a fight and who should lose a fight. Luffy, Sanji, and Usopp should not in any existence lose that fight. You can say all you want, like, oh, but they're in his environment. Yes, he had mantra and could see 2 to 3 seconds ahead. There are 3 of them and 1 of him. If they attack at the same time, there is generally no way for him to beat them. I would throw that into the cons category, is that he kind of just banks on it the entire time, which makes him an even worse character. He's like the kid in my Valorant games that's going 1-16, finally saves up his pennies for an operator and just starts clicking people because that's all he could do. And what literally put him at the very bottom of the list of priests for me was how he lost. He summons these Dragon Balls and Luffy simply grabs the string. It like blows Satori's mind. He's like, what? I can't believe you've done this. And then he just loses. This fight that for some reason took 4 episodes to cover, he loses because he just lets Luffy grab the string and dies. It did get some points the way he lost though, solely because the way Sanji brings his foot down onto the top of Satori's skull. I almost shed a tear. It was kind of beautiful. Smoking that Satori pack. Red Bozo. Third is Gidatsu. Gidatsu is almost way too dumb. I love his character design. I think he's very intimidating. His eyes roll back into his head and then he wonders why he can't see. He literally has to have a divine soldier go, hey, Mr. Gidatsu, sir, don't forget you can't see when your eyes roll into the back of your head. And he's like, oh, that's right. I thought it was funny at first. I don't think it overstayed its welcome, but it took a lot off of the character for me by how dumb he was. That and like the lip biting, I forget what that even affected. Like he would like bite his lower lip and Yeah, he forgets to breathe. He almost lost to Satori, but it just wasn't enough. His fight with Chopper, it was a sick fight. I was hype watching Chopper give it to Gedatsu. He did it all by himself and like his own plan and everything, even though it was even like a 2v1 at first. Also, Gedatsu's power was kind of just weird. Like he makes like the hamburger cloud and then just throws at you. You drown in it. Kind of a metal power, I won't even lie. That's kind of hardcore, but it's just kind of like, oh, okay. I think Chopper versus Gedatsu was a big plus. Number 2, let's hope I remembered his name correctly, is Shura. Now, I actually liked Shura and Ohm. I thought they were both really cool. Shura was really cool based off the fact his fight with Gonfall, I really liked. He literally beat down Chopper too. Genuinely like violent how he threw Chopper around. I thought it was very cool character design. They integrated a dial for his spear, which kind of made sense. They also integrated a dial for his bird. Like the bird had the flame dial inside of it, and that's how it breathed fire. They kind of just said that, and I was like, okay, that doesn't make a ton of sense, but yeah, we'll just keep going. He was ready to burn down the Going Merry, and he's ready to go on to the next thing, because I mean, it's on the sacrificial altar, and it's kind of just meant to be sacrificed. Our number 1 spot is Ohm, the best of them all, the coolest of them all by far. Had a whip sword, badass. Iron Ordeal, really cool. Iron Ordeal shoots out barbed wires everywhere. He's got them set as traps. He has a dog that he trained to box. I mean, like, what more can you ask for? Everything about him was cool. His character design, his perspective on life, basically mourned them like because they had to be sacrificed to Eneru. At least that's what he believed. His fight with Zoro was dope. Everything about Ohm, I think, made him the best priest. So that takes us to who's in charge of all the priests. Eneru is the best part about Skypiea. Awesome villain, very intimidating, very powerful, funny when he's on screen, doesn't mess around most of the time. Like he gets his job done. Well, doesn't, but like he tries. His character design is just sick. Everything about him I liked. Very intimidating too, especially how you don't really know his limits in terms of everything until the very end of the arc, in terms of like what he can and can't hear or see, who he can and can't beat, and how Luffy's literally like his natural born enemy. Plus, just like, dude, his facial expressions. Every time it panned to Eneru like reacting to somebody just bringing up some BS, I would start laughing. I'm pretty sure this is like whenever Usopp is standing there like, hey Eneru, I'm gonna make you really uncomfortable by yelling weird stuff, and it just cuts to him like this. This shot, probably the second coolest shot in the arc. Just Wiper, Zoro, and Gonfall standing there confronting Ohm, and then the snake in the background. Super cool shot. I really want to see the manga panel for this. I would imagine the manga panel looks exactly the same. Dude, that is so cool. Like, what a sick shot. I'm glad they kept it the exact same. Luffy being stuck in the snake did get a tad bit annoying. Luffy fighting Wiper originally was a tad bit annoying, because that's just another one of those things where Luffy's like, hey, I don't have a problem with you, and then Wiper would have been like, hey, I don't have a problem with you either, and they would have just moved on. But it made sense why they kept him in there so long when Nami and the rest of them got tossed in. The reaction to seeing Luffy in there was really funny too. We need to backtrack a tiny bit. This is probably my favorite shot of the arc, because it was like everyone came together and it was just like one common enemy. At this point, I was still so invested in the arc because I still felt like there was no equal to Eneru. So whenever this happened, the fact that I still felt like these four would lose, and they did, the fact that I still had that feeling was a really good feeling to have, because feeling outmatched just adds to the intensity of it. We'll backtrack a tiny bit more. My main gripe with this arc in terms of the pacing, and I'm pretty sure it's like unanimously agreed upon, is the pacing during the survival games. The Shandians versus the Holy Warriors, probably like 60% of that could have been cut out. Zoro versus Braum was really cool, the guy with the two guns. I'll even be generous. I'll say when Eneru comes down, which is episode 167, those survival games last all the way towards 178, 180. I mean, over 10 episodes of just fighting in the upper yard. 1,000,000% could have been cut down to probably 6 at the very least. I think that was the main problem with the arc. So the truth comes to light that this is Jaya. This was the original, like, I mean, it kind of teased here and there, like this wasn't originally here. And I didn't even catch on at first. Like when they were talking about the dirt and they called it Verth, I was just like, oh, that's weird. And I don't know why. I just sat there. I was just like, yeah, that's odd. When I feel like in reality, most people be like, oh, this is the land no one was talking about. It took me until Nami literally found the other half of the house to be like, oh, that moment was impactful, but not as impactful until later down the line when we learn more of the backstory. So the priests are defeated. They finally make it to Eneru. Inaru wipes everybody. Honestly, for me, the peak of this arc in terms of the fighting, Luffy versus Inaru, it was the first fight between them. The face. I can't believe I didn't even anticipate this, but rubber doesn't conduct, so the lightning doesn't affect Luffy. I'm anticipating whenever I post a reaction, 80% of the comments are gonna be like, how did you not see that coming? Rubber doesn't conduct. I lost my mind when this happened. This is basically Inaru's reaction when someone actually stopped, like didn't take damage from him for the very first time, I'm assuming ever. They are very lucky that Luffy is rubber, because that literally like negates his entire power. Here's the face in the manga. Why is it so detailed? He had to have known exactly what he was doing. I mean, I know he does. I love Inaru so much, man. I really do. Luffy kind of shocked me. One, he tries just emptying his mind of all thoughts and just goes brain dead. So like, if he doesn't know what he's doing, how can Inaru? Kind of five head, I'm not even gonna lie. When that stops, he goes to the giant door, I believe, just like the wall basically of the ship, and starts throwing punches at it so they ricochet off, so that he wouldn't be able to predict ricochets because it's random. It's RNG the way like his fists are gonna ricochet off. That fight to me was much better done than the fight at the very end, which I'll kind of explain my gripes about. This almost made me stop watching the arc. I almost actually dropped One Piece right here. I almost stopped watching One Piece, dropped everything, and started Haikyuu instead. I'm going to put chat in emote only mode right now, because this I feel has to do with very overarching themes, and I don't trust anybody these days. This is still living rent-free in my head, and I think it will continue to forever. The ghost that repaired the ship is living rent-free in my head. I cannot tell you. I think there were 4 episodes left, and every single time an episode started, I was like, oh, we're probably gonna get the reveal this episode for whoever was repairing the ship that night. It never happened. The arc ended. I got to the end of episode 195 and the end credits hit, and I was like, huh, that's crazy. We never found out. I couldn't have cared less that the arc was over and they made it back to Earth. All of my existence was built on finding out who this damn ghost was, and I never did. And it's still driving me crazy. The fact that that's something overarching. It's driving me mad. I lose sleep over this. I can't wait for episode 636 when I finally find out that it was just a squirrel that was living on board and that was a stowaway and decided to help them out, and that's all that was. So the arc maximum's in the air. Luffy gets his arm encased in a ball of gold, that sucks, and thrown off the ship. One small problem I had, Luffy at first makes it seem like he can't even remotely move himself. Maybe an episode or 2 later, that dude is sprinting around like it is a balloon attached to him. But it kind of comes into play in the finale, which I'll get to. I think the only good thing to come out of the fight between Sanji, Usopp, and Inaru was this, where he electrocutes the entirety of Sanji, and he's just like, oh, thanks, I appreciate the light for my cigarette. Speaking of JackTheBus, the whole concept of JackTheBus is really cool. Basically, Inaru's ship emits these dark clouds that transmit electricity even easier, and then he uses that to kind of just strike everything down. The name is very cool, especially for the climax of the arc. Probably the second or third coolest moment of the arc. First off, Wiper using reject again on Inaru. They brought up reject. They were like, yeah, the reject dial, you use it once and like your body is shattered into a million pieces and your arm is blown off. By the end of the arc, Wiper would like see a fly and reject it. It was not that serious, my man. It was a cool moment though when he hopped on Inaru and the reject dial had the sea prism stone in it, so it like kind of like negated Inaru's powers. But the even cooler moment was Inaru laying there and then him slowly restarting his heart with the electricity. And I think a big part of it, the sound design for it. The sound design for Inaru restarting his heart was very, very, very good. It was very intimidating. It was completely silent, and they all just sat there and watched as like he just like started like convulsing. It was really cool. Now I think about it, I don't know why they didn't just start beating him down, but still, it doesn't take away from the fact that it was probably like one of the coolest moments when he restarted his heart. So we'll get to the finale of it, but first we have to kind of cover the backstory. While Inaru's entire plan is going down, they actually go into the backstory behind Kagura, the Shandian warrior, and Noland, the liar. I was very shocked by how well done this was. They did this backstory as Inaru is raining hell down upon Angel Island. When you do a backstory at a moment this critical, it has to be very good and very necessary because you're taking away from the pacing. Honestly, I would say the backstory was probably my favorite part of the arc as well. Noland the liar, he arrives on this island where he finds Kalgara and the Shandians. He has a cure for their disease. Their ideals kind of clash because the Shandians believe in sacrificing to save their own people. Noland kind of shows them this treatment that he has and basically questions why Kalgara would let these other lives go to waste for this cure that they found. And it took a lot because they butt heads a lot because they're from such different backgrounds. Like, of course they're gonna butt heads and disagree on everything. They become such good friends. And I think my favorite part was whenever Kalgara showed them the City of Gold, which this is absolutely stunning from the manga. So it's what we see in Skypiea, but it's just all the gold is still there. And the bell, of course, right in smack down in the middle. And I actually didn't even notice the poneglyph until they directly pointed it out, but it was correct. It was directly under the bell. My favorite moment was him showing them the City of Gold and be like, yeah, you can take what you want, as long as you don't take the bell because you saved our lives. Because there's such a stupid amount of gold here that they could take as much as their ship can possibly carry and they wouldn't even dent how much gold is in this city. We'll continue the backstory. Noland and Kalgara experience their first strife when Noland cuts down these trees and it's revealed that those were a big part of the Shandians' heritage. When they revealed that, I was like, dude, he messed up so bad that like it's something that's irreversible. So there's literally no fixing this relationship. I was like heartbroken. But then it's kind of revealed that he cut down the trees because they contributed to this disease that was spreading throughout the island. They were the reason that people were getting infected. So it was kind of that cliche of both sides not being of understanding of the other. And then it started to go down that path of, oh, they're just going to stay mad at each other and hate each other their whole lives until Kalgara's daughter, it's spelled M-O-U-S-S-E, Moose, tells them and then runs back and tells Kalgara and basically saves everything. And the scene of like Kalgara running to the shore and like screaming back at Noland was the part that like broke me. Like that was the part where like I was like, damn, that's good story, because we know how everything goes. We know where, you know, Shandora ends up. We know how it ends up for Noland, unfortunately. But at least they have this last moment of I'll be back and we're still good, like no matter what. And they never see each other again. In retrospect, Inaru was never really the main focus of the arc for me. Inaru was a hurdle that they had to get over, but what was more important was not just like beating him, but it was straight up just about ringing that bell so that Cricket down below knew that this place existed. Literally nothing else mattered, because the conflict between Inaru and the angels is one thing. He destroyed the Angel Island and that was a big moment. Like he basically nuked it with Raigo. I think it kind of been building up to that for so long that I was like, okay, he's destroying it. Yeah, okay, I understand. And it was still shocking because he destroyed the entirety of Angel Island. But the real like overarching conflict was making sure that Cricket knew that this place existed and that the 400 years of fighting between the Shandians and the Sky People ended. Yes, Inaru had a part in the fighting. He kind of used them as puppets to an extent, but ringing that bell and defeating Inaru and solidifying this land as one place was much bigger than everything else. So the final fight begins against Inaru. They basically chop down the tree so that Luffy can finally get him this giant ball of gold up to Inaru, and we see A, Inaru's final form, which was really cool. I think underutilized to an extent. And B, I thought this fight didn't really hit as hard as the first one between Luffy and Inaru. I don't think this fight was really that important. Luffy saw him in the way and decided to ring the bell through him. It wasn't about the fight against Inaru. Luffy's like, okay, I'm gonna knock out two birds with one stone. I'm gonna destroy you with this, and I'm gonna ring the bell, because the bell is the main thing that I'm here for. And probably my favorite part of the arc and why the finale delivered, I think the first probably half of Act 3 was kind of weak building up to it, because it takes like 3 solid episodes for them to cut down the tree and to cut down Giant Jack for them to get up there. Speaking of which, I thought Nola the snake, Zoro cutting it, Wiper using reject, Usopp shooting his stuff at it was really cool to knock down, and how they were all like trying to work together. And then Wiper like yelling up at Luffy, like whenever he yelled like straw hat, that was so cool, man. That was so cool, because up until that point Wiper still saw them as enemies. Luffy destroys them, rings the bell, and my favorite part, I'll finally get to it, as he's like finishing Inaru off, it started cutting between so many different things. One, the Shandians and the angels still trying to keep faith and like trust in like a higher power, I thought was cool, because it was a little bit unbelievable that they would live their entire lives believing that there was this god watching over them and helping them, and then to just go to nothing. It was all they knew what to do. It was all they could do by the end of things, because they were so helpless. They were just all on their ships, and all they could do was watch as like everything is destroyed. So they just pray. It cuts between them doing that, everybody else watching Luffy, and then it cuts between the past and the present, between Noland being executed, Kalgura losing to the first god that took over, and then it like kind of wraps it all together because it was the end of that conflict. It marked the end of it, so it looped back around, and the two descendants, Wiper and Cricket, both heard the bell ring at the same time, knowing that marked the end. I think it's mostly like I liked it so much just because at first it seemed like a very small plot point, like, oh, this place might or might not exist. That's cool. Like there's rumors about it. Then it comes so full circle at the end because of the backstory that I don't know. I thought the end was just really well done, despite the fact that I still think that Inaru's like final form was sort of underutilized. It could have been done better since he doesn't really put up much of a fight. And finally, yeah, that one question is answered with the giant angels, which is kind of a little underwhelming to me, honestly. It all made up for it with the shot of Luffy in the clouds grabbing his hat and Cricket and all of them seeing his shadow through the clouds, which is really cool. I think I got choked up seeing Cricket's reaction to the bell ringing. I think like he was like, oh, that's cool, like the bell's ringing. And then it shows him also crying because he knows that Luffy and all of them are safe. I think that's what he says, like the Straw Hat and them are safe. Like that means they're safe. It means they made it up there okay. He hadn't even been worried about himself. Cricket is probably like the least selfish person alive. Like, yeah, he lives to try and disprove that he's not the descendant of a liar. The real thing that broke him, the only thing that actually moved Cricket to tears, was knowing that Luffy and them were alive. So the bell rings, Inaru goes to the moon. Inaru's the best character of all time. This dude loses the fight, falls back on his ship. He's like, finally, after all this time, I can approach endless Earth. And this entire time I've been scratching my head, I was like, all right, so who's gonna tell Inaru that the land down below is not endless and that there's seas? I never anticipated it being the moon, and it makes so much sense because it's endless. Here's one thing I will say. I've been praising this arc a lot. I see a very worrying trend in One Piece. Can anybody guess what this trend is? Hagaya, you are on the money. One Piece is very bad at letting people die. I'm not asking for people to die, but when you see this old man angel in a beam from God himself strike him down into the earth, and then he's just okay at the end, it feels a little cheap. The woman Shandian, yes, Lucky. Oh my gosh, Lucky just walks away. Lucky's just like, hey Isa, hey kiddo, I'm back. Disney Channel like guest star walks in, and then like the crowd cheers like, woo! Yeah, like when Hannah Montana went on Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. So to end off, we do get a little bit of lore at the end, because another like one of my favorite parts that was kind of underrated about the arc, I could have watched Robin explore for hours. Just something about her walking around and looking like ancient stuff is so cool. So the very end of the arc was also very solid, because we get Robin checking out the poneglyph, finally translating it, but more importantly is this message on the poneglyph from who other than Goldie Roger, a personalized message, which was basically like the confirmation of a string of poneglyphs that kind of connect with each other. Kind of sets up for even more of Robin's adventure, because from what I understood is they're all connected in a sort of way, and there's sort of like little things here and there that once again Roger left behind aside from whatever the One Piece is, which may correlate to it, may not, maybe just a separate thing. I love everything about Robin's character, and every time she's on screen I'm like locked in 1,000,000%. So they leave. The whole thing where they think they're like heisting Skypiea, they're like, ha, we're pirates, let's steal all their gold, and they take it out of the snake and they're like running. It was pretty well done. They think they're like pulling off the greatest bank heist of all time. All the Shandians and the angels are like, hey, let's give them this giant chunk of gold that's probably worth billions. They run away because they think they're being caught, and they make their way out. They fall back to Earth again, still driving me crazy that I don't know who the ghost is, and they fall right into a Navy base, which I believe is the filler arc that you guys are saying is pretty worth watching. So I'll hop into that. But that is the end of Skypiea. As they were leaving, all of the crew was like, man, I'm really gonna miss this place. Dog, I was like, let's get back to them 7 blue seas, baby. I love the seas. Let me list out like a TLDR pros and cons. Pros of Skypiea: Inaru, great villain. Really good overarching backstory that contributed to the majority of the plot. Really good location and setting. Cons, drug way too much during Act 2. Act 2 was really rough. The final fight was a bit like kind of anticlimactic, but the backstory kind of made up for it. I would add the backstory to the pros as well. And I guess sort of just the disconnect from the rest of the world makes it feel like a little, not less impactful, because it is still impactful, but it does feel disconnected, especially getting all of that lore dumped right before the arc starts. And then I guess just the supporting cast I wasn't a huge fan of. I think Wiper was probably the strongest of the supporting cast. All of the supporting cast was weak aside from like Wiper and Inaru. But Inaru isn't a supporting cast, he was like the main villain. So that being said, with those pros and those cons, I'd probably give Skypiea like a 7.6 in the end. Nothing mind-blowing, but still really good. So yeah, that's pretty much my general review of Skypiea. I can't wait for you guys to see my reactions to everything as it slowly comes out on YouTube and all that. And I hope to do more of these for future arcs. If you guys in the comments do enjoy this sort of video, I would love to do more in the future, because I know it's just gonna get more lore dumpy, more confusing, more stuff to talk about. So I think it could be really fun, like sort of a tradition when I finish arcs to do these. So just let me know down in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.